years to come, I do hope students can utilize these images as like a form, like, utilize them for research or just
Mhm.
anyone that's just curious about, oh, what was it like, after COVID, like at Morgan and like, oh,
Yeah.
COVID, what is a pandemic? Like, how did you guys get through that? So
I
I
don't know
think,
how we got through it, honestly.
no, literally.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Rundown with Jordan Brown. This is Jordan Brown here, and I am joined by Jewel Champbell. She is a multimedia artist from Brooklyn, New York, and a graduate of Morgan State University, the illustrious. Jewel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I definitely wanted to talk to you about a lot of your work, the work that you have produced for your online zine that you just published, the Memoria Continuum, and also talk about our time at Morgan State together. We were both on the spokesman staff for some time, and also getting into some of the archival projects that you work on now.
Yes.
So, the first thing that I wanted to touch on, because I know that both photography and archival studies are like a really big part of your life and just your career that you are transforming into. So, I wanted to ask you, how would you say that your interest in photography began, and how has it shaped the trajectory of where you are in life now?
Okay. So it definitely began at Morgan State University. I came into college as an English major. I stayed with that for a week. As I told my mother I wanted to be a teacher. So yeah, so I'm an educator. I just went into that. But then I switched to political science. I became really passionate about that, and I stayed with political science until my junior year of I believe it was 2019. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I got into photography. I was acquainted with it. That's another segue with the majors, but I met my alumni mentors my freshman year. They had this I guess like they had this meeting it was for the Bridging the Gap 1972 to 2022, which was my actual like class year that I was supposed to
Yeah.
graduate. And they had a bunch of alumni that were there. And it was just really a space for really that intergenerational dialogue, like just
Mhm.
to meet different alumni from like, I mean, even me being in the same room as someone that graduated in 1972 was just like so amazing to me in terms of just generations of like Morganites. So
Yeah.
I became acquainted with, I left with about three mentors, two from 1972. I would say they adopted me, Miss
Mhm.
Linda Davis and Miss Celeste Scott, and Kelvin Davis of 1997.
Mhm.
So then, just speaking with them and sharing my interests in political science and whatnot, I really became interested in their journeys, their personal journeys at Morgan, because I was like, oh man, like what did it look like? Just all these different
Mhm.
things. So that's when I went into the special collection space, the Beulah M. Davis Special Collections Department at the Earl S. Richardson Library in at Morgan State, and I was looking at the yearbooks and just looking through each page, I was really moved by just the documentation, and then also telling myself like, oh, students took these photos, like that was, and even advisors as well, but just in general the student-led documentation was very moving and just so beautiful to experience. And even matching the images with like what I'm seeing like present day at Morgan. So that was just
Mhm.
something that was very moving and just stimulating for me. And it unlocked like just a love for photography after that. I got like my first camera off of I think Depop. I remember, no wait, actually it was Savers.
Okay.
And then I shot a roll of film, and the film actually had someone else's film on it because I wasn't too educated on film. I was in the YouTube University learning. I was very persistent with this, but then I
Mhm.
documented my friends when we were living. This is my sophomore year, also like in coordination with the.
Like before COVID.
Yeah, it was before COVID. I actually started taking photos. My friend, she was when the pool was open and everything. I was taking
Okay,
photos
yeah.
there. So I
Mhm.
have all these like images that I was developing to also just honor the documentation that just student photographers have done with the yearbooks and yearbook
Mhm.
clubs. I became really fascinated with that, and yeah, just documenting was really fun. But then I also was like, how could I develop these photos? So I found out that we had a darkroom on campus, and I became acquainted with the professor, Eric Briscoe, and he was
Okay.
teaching a photography class. So I'm a political science major, mind you, and I'm just like, oh, like where's Murphy? Like, what is like not where is it, but just where are these like places, So
Yeah.
then I found out we had a dark room, and then I spoke with him, and I on the record, I was sitting in on his class, and he allowed me to sit in and just shadow the students. To be very honest, that was like the greatest thing ever. We were like going on like we did an assignment, and we just did different things that was just so like just cool to me at that
Mhm.
time, not even being like a visual arts major.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean like since then I've been acquainted with Mr. Eric Briscoe. He's the visual arts coordinator, and just, kind of floating in and out there. I was like going back and forth between where political science, like the department was, and then also Murphy. And then when I changed my major to multi-platform production, I was going from
You were across the
SGA.
other side of
Yeah,
campus.
I was I was just moving. But yeah, looking at the documentation, I just had a moment. So I started taking photos during COVID, and then, I mean, not during COVID, excuse me, before COVID, and then we went back home, and that's when I started
Mhm.
documenting at home. And I was still a political science major, so I was in the darkroom class before COVID and whatnot.
Gotcha.
And then during that time when we were at home, I just had a moment where I think it was time for me to meet with my advisor at the end of the spring semester.
Hmm.
And I was just like, I think I want to change my major. And it was very emotional for me to do that because, it's a sacrifice just going away to school, like, period. I'm from Brooklyn, so I just
Yeah.
like the 3 hours away. I had to really negotiate with my mom to even go away to school, to be very honest, and transparent. So I was just like, oh, I think I'm gonna be in school at extra. I was like, am I gonna graduate with my friends? And it was just so
Yeah.
many changes, the pandemic and things that I didn't expect upon like enrolling. So
Hmm.
yeah, I was like, you know what? I want to do this, and I'm gonna stick on it. I'm gonna stick with it. So I changed my major to multi-platform production because I really wanted to center documentation at like just the forefront of my studies. So
Yeah.
that's why I made that shift. I love political science. It was really fun and just exciting. But multi-platform production was like, my second home and my newfound home that I was able to embark on photography through. I know it was very in terms of like just, moving images and film based in some aspect of like, video editing, audio production and whatnot. But I really took the time outside of, the classroom to really strengthen my composition through photography. So
Hmm.
that's like kind of where I developed my eye. And then that led to me, my senior capstone project, we're supposed to make videos. And I remember asking Professor Red, can I make a book? And I was like, I just connected all the dots from like when I did that early found research on the yearbooks and stuff in 2019. But long
Hmm.
story short, that's how I got into photography. And I've been at it since then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on how your transition from political science to then you were in multi-platform production, and specifically in that senior capstone class that you did. I know like your project was supposed to be centered around like a video project, like
Yeah.
you said, but then pitching a book idea. How did that idea like really come to fruition? You putting what putting what your craft was like into like documenting and putting it into the senior capstone that you ended up producing.
Yeah, I know. Definitely the way that even came into fruition was through my research with the yearbooks. I had noticed that the last edition was 2018, 2019.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, I mean, I started to think about my capstone like my junior year, which was, I mean, no, wait. Actually, because I had an extra, my senior year, my first senior year is supposed to be my junior year in 2022.
Yeah.
Just to clarify. But in terms of like during that year, we're supposed to be thinking about capstone and all these other things. And I'm just like, oh, what do I want to do?
Mhm.
And I was sitting there and I was like, well, maybe I should like figure out how to revisit the yearbook and kind of like reimagine that in 2023 if we had a yearbook club and a yearbook staff. And I like going into 2023, the fall, I was just because I took my capstone class my spring semester, and I was just taking my time to kind of like understand what that would look like. Thinking about, would I have to create a system? How would this work? So I started doing some research on other yearbook staffs in Maryland, at other HBCUs. I had to also keep into consideration that we're a state school, so just in terms of where the funding goes and how the
Mhm.
funding is distributed and all of that. But yeah, that idea really just came from the absence of the publication. And I think, things happen. I get it. And I also understand that COVID was really, it was challenging to kind of figure out or pivot, in
Hmm.
that transition that we had. And that was something that they haven't had that in school ever. So I mean, everybody was just really trying to like adjust and
Yeah.
adapt to that. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna take the initiative to do this. This was something I was just really passionate about. And I looped in about 8 of my friends. It was 9 of us in total from different majors and different classifications. I was very intentional about that because um just in general within the yearbooks, they had like students that were like engineering or like they had like a dance major, like, it was just different, like
Hmm.
social work, like different majors, and they just had a
Yeah.
love for just storytelling. So I think that really was very inspiring in terms of me, kind of, I don't want to say curating, but just more so like just facilitating that space because I was like, you need to be front facing, Jewel, with this. Like, and just the idea of being at like, even when I was looking at the yearbooks, I was like, I was telling my mentors, like when I was like a sophomore and like a junior, I was like, I would love to be an editor in chief, but I just didn't really feel like I was ready to be in a position like that. I know that takes a lot of work, and even like through your role that you had with the spokesman, I
Hmm.
know that's a lot of like you're on call. Like you
Yeah.
gotta be, yeah, things are
Yeah.
not, come like, someone can't do something. It's just
Gotta
a
like fill
I would say
in.
a very collaborative environment. So
Hmm.
that was something that I learned from the spokesman, just seeing how the structure was with everything. I was like, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna do this. And
Hmm.
my friends, they were very supportive, and even like people that I wasn't as close to, I developed a relationship through that process. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's how that came into fruition. And yeah.
Can you tell me about what you saw from Morgan's like previous yearbooks, the Prometheans, and how you wanted to mirror that in the project that you were creating for your senior capstone? Like, what differences did you see what Morgan was like for yearbooks like the 70s, 80s, and 90s versus like campus culture in the post-COVID era?
I would say what really felt like I felt called to was the documentation one, but also just the reflections. Like that is a form of oral history. I mean, like, although I'm not able to meet them like in time and space right now, I just felt in conversation with them, just reading the books. The editor-in-chief notes. I know it's similar, not similar to a newspaper. However, I do feel as though the storytelling and the curated memory that was like found within the yearbooks of like this is what the year was like. I
Hmm.
just found that to be so moving. But I would say like, they had homecoming, they had the sports events, they had like different sections for everything, but I was like so moved by the artists that they had. Oh my God. Like
Yeah.
they I had mentioned in my Substack like Bobby Humphrey. I'm like, oh
Hmm.
man, like, and I'm sure they had the Blackbirds. I saw that they had James Cleveland. It was just so many different people that I was like, oh, I have these vinyl records at home. I can't imagine that live. So I was just so excited to look into that and see like, what was the music. It gave me a glance of like what was the music like,
Hmm.
what were they dressing like? How was their hair? I also saw that there was like a fall cultural like festival or fair that
Okay.
they had, and it was like, a stage in the quad, and then they had like a band performing and whatnot. I
Hmm.
thought that was really beautiful too, because I saw like people brought their children. It was just a very community-centered event. They also had like a Kwanzaa celebration and also the coronations. Oh man,
Hmm.
like the coronations are profound. I mean, they still
Yeah.
are. I do feel like the productions are like just in terms of generationally, they're all in conversation. I
Hmm.
think they all are just very important and just so beautiful. But the
Yeah.
curation, just seeing the documentation back then, it felt like a portal. Like I was honestly time traveling, and I still I see myself as like, aside from my other roles, I feel like a time traveler. But
Yeah.
yeah, and even the McKeldin Center was something that
Hmm.
I was, because my mentor, she was like, oh, like Keldon Center, that was our student center. And I'm like, I hear you, like I hear you. And then I was like, I hear you, but now I see what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm
like
like, oh, it was
picturing that.
live. Yeah, I
Hmm.
was like, it was live in here. And even something I did also mention in my Substack was when I was a student during this process, because it was just very, not to say it wasn't labor intensive, but it just took a lot of energy out of me because it was just like I can only imagine what it was like when they were like tasked with that, just putting a yearbook together.
Yeah.
But just in general, I would sit in McKeldin, like just reading the books, even when I like needed some motivation or I just wanted to really provide some meditation for myself, I would
Hmm.
sit in the space because nobody would really, people would walk in there, but it would be so-so. But I would literally just sit in there reading the books and like just listening to the music from those time periods and like just like actually closing my eyes and then like just seeing the images that I'm seeing in the books. And that was just like so just therapeutic and very spiritual for me,
Hmm.
honestly. But yeah, definitely there were so many things that were consistent over the years, but I feel like just the energy was always present in my opinion in the
Yeah.
photographs and how they
Mhm.
documented the students. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like your work really highlights the importance and also the appeal, the appeal. A lot of people enjoy seeing like old pictures of what their college campuses looked like back in the day. But I think your work also highlights the loss of that like physical media and keeping those pictures, continuing on the yearbooks and like having it with you in hand.
Mhm.
What do you have to say about like the physical media, keeping that alive in this era of like the digital space?
I I remember when I was a senior, I was very, very adamant and very serious about having print. And that was something else I was investigating as well. In terms of just researching, investigation sounds kind of like extreme, but researching, honestly, because I was just like, I think when I think of investigation, I was just like being very inquisitive and I'm like, well, when was the last print publication? Just
Right.
looking at what they have in the archival space and what was represented through like a finding aid. And then I'm like, okay, so it stopped like the print publication stopped at this point, and then also when did the digital publication start? So
Hmm.
I was in conversation with different professors and different faculty, and just kind of figuring that out. But I would say in terms of I believe print is very necessary, just being able like just in general me being able to feel and touch and experience tangibly these artifacts and these documents, these yearbooks, there's so much energy in just touching this and just experiencing it in that form. There's also a lot of craftsmanship in terms of like the printing company, seeing the advertisements for it, the embossing. There's just so many like intentional like layers to it that I feel like you can learn something just, through questioning like, oh, how did they do that? Or do they still emboss books like this? Or like,
Hmm.
oh, Justin's and like, just learning about all these printing companies that they went through. I know it was like Taylor Publishing and there were different companies and whatnot, but I know also something that was brought up was just the expenses of printing, and even in the 70s and even probably like going into 90s, people weren't picking up their yearbooks. I understand those are factors, so I like to be practical. I'm like, okay, print is great, but also there are some other elements to it that can be not as cost effective, but that's why I actually launched Black Ground Press, which is my independent press initiative, to understand like self-publishing, but also how can I do this in a more cost-effective way,
Yeah.
like, and that's when I learned about zines and I'm like, oh, what is a zine? And then I'm like
Hmm.
going into, because my friend Kumi actually gave me one of his photo zines, one of my classmates in my photography class, that's where we met. And I was just like, oh, what is this? Like, I'm like, oh, you can like we can make this, like this is
Yeah.
something that can be done. So yeah, when I was working on my project, it was digital just because of those funding barriers, but a lot of it was just self-funded from my stipends from our projects and programs that I was in my senior year.
Mhm.
I intentionally shot everything on film, just to kind of also see what that experience was like, from through the lens of, generations before me, my elders,
Yeah.
just seeing what they went through, and that's why I actually started out with film and kind of went back and forth. Not within the project, but just in general throughout my matriculation in terms of documentation. I
Mhm.
just wanted to really like get a feel for that. And I remember for the spokesman, it was the commencement, the spring commencement with the first one like
Since
post-pandemic.
COVID, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I
I
remember.
remember
Yeah, yeah.
I remember doing like phone images because I didn't have a digital camera, but I also took some like film
The film
images.
ones turned out really
Yeah,
cool.
thank
Yeah.
you. And I remember like walking around with this like box camera trying to like document and take the photos. And I was telling myself like I can do this. I can definitely do this. But I was like I got on this like nice outfit and I got this bulky camera and people were like, "What is that?" Looking at it, but that
Mhm.
was really a fun experience and I really just I enjoy kind of like not to say living vicariously, but just like learning through those processes,
Yeah.
of what our elders have done, just like the intention behind it and really like pulling from that and utilizing that also as like life lessons too. Like,
Mhm.
you have to be very intentional with like how you document and stuff too. So
Mhm.
yeah, the 36 exposures, the 27, and the medium format is just 10. So
Mhm.
yeah, or it can be 8 too. I have a camera
Mhm.
where it's like 8 literally,
Oh, wow.
depending on like the dimension. So
Mhm.
yeah, that was something that was really fueling. But print is that was something I wanted to emphasize throughout the project and why I even like it took me some time to kind of like develop how can I approach this, or how can I not introduce, it has been
Mhm.
introduced, but just kind of reintroduce and engage people in like why print is important. So
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to get back to your zine because you were talking about like one of your classmates introducing you to a photo zine. And I know that this project started with your senior capstone, and you've now been able to publish this zine to your website, share it with a lot of people. How were you able to continue this work after you graduated from Morgan?
Um, it was a bit difficult. Like I remember writing, like my lease ended and I was back home. So, a lot of this I carried home with me, but I was just in a constant state of just thought of like how can I work on this 3 hours away or like, and it was ironic that I like visited Morgan like every few months, but
Hmm.
um yeah, I would say that in terms of working on this post grad, I did my senior capstone, but it was more than just like, I need this to graduate. It was like, how do I actually want to like pour into this project further? There was like a deeper a message and the intention was still there, but just in general, I was just really curious about how to just engage with this further and even into my just independent work. So yeah, I would say like the first couple of like months into the year, I was like still in my, in imaginative state of like how like what can happen and how can this happen? But as I mentioned, I like to be practical. There needs to be a system in place. So, for example, if there was a yearbook club, they already have a system where it's like people that were in the staff, they're like, underclassmen. And I've seen like from past yearbooks from like the 1930s, and I actually was able to do more research at home when they digitized the yearbook. So they hadn't digitized the yearbooks when I was I think they digitized a few to
Okay.
be correct. They digitized a few. So a lot of my research was through physical copies that were donated to me by
Hmm.
Dr. Edwin T. Johnson. So he donated
Okay.
like a bunch of yearbooks to me. But those were the books that I took home and I was just like reading them and then they digitized everything. So that made my research like a bit smoother in terms of figuring things out, like when did the Promethean start? But I noticed that it was led by the senior class and then
Hmm.
underclass, as they would say, underclassmen, they were kind of stepping into position. Even looking at the 70s, there was some familiar faces where I was like, oh, he was editor in chief one year, and then he was on the staff again as student advisor, and then did sports.
Hmm.
So there was just like kind of like there was a community there
Yeah.
in terms of like passing that on and carrying that torch,
Hmm.
in that flame. So. I think, yeah, that was kind of what I was thinking of when I graduated. But I was also in a space of, I want to figure out how to embark on this like in a professional stance, like, just pursuing this like professionally.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just educating myself, kind of going back into the project and then like taking some time from it also so that
Hmm.
I can kind of reapproach it. And that's how Memoria Continuum came into fruition. But I did work on my 1 year post grad. I had a friend that was in an MFA program at Parsons, and I had shared my project with them, and I was able to work on some collage work from the oral history that I had documented from the students through the portrait sessions, and I created like a collage piece that I installed at an exhibition that she curated there. So
Okay.
that was really great, and that was really fun to work on. But it was just like kind of revisiting it in different forms. The zine was not like it was in my mind and in thought, but even Black Ground Press was something that I did as of like January of 2025 because I was like just learning so much information
Yeah.
when I came back home.
Hmm. And I was thinking, like, in terms of a central theme, what do you think that viewers will be able to take away from the Memoria Continuum, like looking at Morgan's legacy over the years, how the campus has changed, how it's grown. What would you say is like a central theme from your project?
Central theme. I would say a central theme that I would say from the project is just the importance of preserving memory. Um, just even looking at the documentation, I just felt called to figure out, like how can I document my experience now? And even like I think a lot of, the things that I do, it's kind of like associated with like forward thought of like, when I'm 50, I can look back at this and be like, oh, that's my friend, when they were on the bridge. And I wanted to like have that shared experience as, our elders in terms of how they recalled their memories and figuring out how do I create memories, but also another theme is that we are all contributing to an archive. Like we are all creating and developing, just imagery and documentation. So I definitely feel like, just the shared authorship was something else that I wanted to emphasize as well in alignment with the theme, but just that, this is a continuum. So the continuum of memory is not just something that, I'm presenting as these are all my photos, but I think it's important to also have that shared authorship as it was, like in the yearbooks and whatnot. And even
Mhm.
when you go into an archive, it's just images from different places, different people, different perspectives. So I really want that to be aligned with the central theme as well in terms of the intention of like really having that continuum and just continuous memory. Like it's ongoing in
Yeah.
motion, like just flowing, ever flowing.
Yeah, I really love that. I was wondering like where the name came from, but I think it like really suits the
Yeah.
idea of the project, just keeping the effort going. And I really hope it like inspires the students at Morgan now, like to keep that physical media, taking pictures, trying to have some sort of like print edition of them. Because I know for myself, like I would take pictures on campus and like make my own kind of scrapbooks, like printing pictures out, but there's still so many pictures that I don't have where I feel like that got lost, like on my phone or like a computer or something that I didn't take the time to actually print. So I 100% second like the importance of just documenting, making sure that you have like you can preserve it so you can look back on it like in the future, something for your kids to see.
Yeah, it's very important. And that was the reason why I had worked on Frames of Continuum as like kind of like a sub project of Memoria Continuum, just to
Hmm.
figure out how can I provide an activity, for the community as well. Even with me being away 3 hours, what's a day that we all come back? And I would love to do it for other events and even
Yeah.
have it extended like, as like something just for students or just an alumni perspective, like just kind of testing out those different things. But even with Frames of Continuum, that was really fun just even launching. It was very like I was like, I hope people will like,
Hmm.
reach out to do this. Because I
Yeah.
put out the call like literally like not the week of homecoming, but the week before, I believe.
Hmm.
And it was just kind of like not abrupt. It was intentional, but I think the thing is like with the timing of everything. So I was just like, I'm gonna get the cameras, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. But even getting the cameras back was great. I have been working with a student, her name is Courtney Fisher, and she's been like really helpful in terms of just and that was very important to me as well, working with a student because now I'm
Hmm.
an alumni and I also just feel as though yearbook spaces were also, spaces to just develop so many skills as a newspaper staff is as well, but just in
Yeah.
general, those, collegiate led spaces, and community spaces, you can develop so many skills through them. So I
Hmm.
was like, what's a way that I can, have a student involved and also just share this space with someone too. So that was something that was very important. But yeah, with Frames of Continuum, it was really great also having the reflections to be assigned with that. I really wanted them
Yeah.
to be handwritten. That was something, but I was like, oh, we're not in like 1980 where I have a mail box and people are mailing me mail, like fan mail
Hmm.
and letters. But I still love to explore those things in present day because I think they're just still important. So yeah, I know I do hope in years to come. That's something that reassures me that, years to come, I do hope students can utilize these images as like a form, like, utilize them for research or just
Hmm.
anyone that's just curious about, oh, what was it like, after COVID, like at Morgan and like, oh,
Yeah.
COVID, what is a pandemic? Like, how did you guys get through that? So
I
I
don't know
think
how we got through it, honestly.
no, literally. So I think just all in all, it's just important. Documentation is like so important. And also I didn't want it to feel like, oh, I have to be like a professional photographer to contribute to a publication. I
Yeah.
definitely feel like everyone has their own eye. And I even like emphasize that with like equipment. I'm like, it's all in your eye more than like
Hmm.
the thing that the camera and what you're using, like it was yeah, it's just so many different things
Hmm.
around that I've developed and even reapproached over time in terms of like, oh, I don't need this expensive camera to like document this, but it really is like, and I even take like, now I've gotten to the point where I'm taking pictures of my eyes, not like on
Oh,
some
okay.
meta stuff, but like but like on like for real though, like just like I'm like the composition, like composing with, yeah, it's,
Like framing in your mind.
yeah, literally
Yeah.
framing in my mind.
Mhm.
So that's just something that I love it, but sometimes I'm like,
You want to take a break. You're like, can I be
yeah,
off of like curator mode in my head?
yeah, it's like you can't turn that off. So
Yeah.
that's something definitely I've been telling myself, like, like just keep doing what I'm doing. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's
100%.
I've been just being persistent and I've dedicated like now I'm like dedicating all of my time to it. So it's just so much to pour into it for it to grow. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited for it in the future. And I do want to keep, a consistent collection of these zines. And I
Hmm.
also would love to distribute them to students. That's something that I intend to do as well.
So,
Because yeah, just a part of that circulation. And that's why I launched Blackground Press so that I can distribute,
mhm.
yeah, through that.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely wanted to ask, like, as we wrap things up, like, what can viewers expect from you, like, on your zine productions and also just you in the archival space? I know you work on a lot of different projects as well and like in a fellowship. Can you talk about what viewers can expect from you moving forward?
More research. Like simply put, just more thoughts, more research. But yeah, I mean, just in general with that project, I am really hoping to interview past editor-in-chiefs, past, people, members of the yearbook staff, like just in general, providing that space for that memory. That's like the whole thing about just the continuum of memory, but yeah, just interviewing and also like current students as well, being able like even at other institutions, other HBCUs and
Mhm.
interviewing their yearbook clubs and learning from them as well. Like I think just creating that space for that because like there may be another school like somewhere where they may not have it. And that was something that I researched through it was a Baltimore Sun article. It was as yearbooks die, colleges lose a link to the past. And that was an article that really like led me to really like see what was going on. It was published in 2016. So at the time, Morgan State
Wow.
University was print on demand. But just in
Mhm.
general, like, so many schools have like stopped their yearbook. So
Yeah.
it was focused on Maryland primarily, but yeah, just in general, I would love to speak with other yearbook clubs and just, allow this to be a space for alumni to, I would love to open up for submissions too. That's something else that I really want to do,
Mhm.
for people to also just share their experiences. And it can even be from, let's say, like the 90s or like the 80s or even like down to 2013 or 2025. I just want to have like a space and a collection of that because a question that I have is, in the absence of yearbooks, how are we preserving our memory right now? If there isn't a yearbook, where are all these like digital files and materials going and how are they circulating? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's just so many questions that I have. So that's the reason why I was like, okay, a zine is a great way to kind of have those moments frozen in time and
Mhm.
donating them. An intention of mine also is to donate all of the zines to the special collections space in department as well.
Awesome.
Um, but yeah, that is mainly like what I see for Memoria Continuum in the future, and also just facilitating it as a digital archive of some sort that is like run by students and alumni. I would just love to continue that. So
Yeah.
I am continuing it, but that's just like literally a dream for me right now to just
Yeah.
utilize that as a space.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Jewel, I really think the work that you're doing is super important. I think that Morgan is honestly really lucky to have someone like you and all the people that have helped you with this project be able to like archive these memories and just the passion that you've put in it over the years. I think is super important. And I'm glad that you're able to bring this to life and continue like putting everything into it. So thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
I
for joining
appreciate
me
it.
today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.